Hello, everyone. You are in the CNN newsroom. I'm Amara Walker at CNN Center in for Poppy Harlow. Breaking news on CNN right now. More than 1,400 people are dead in a massive earthquake, and that number will probably rise considerably in the coming hours. It happened in Nepal, the small Himalayan country between China and India. The earthquake was massive, measuring 7.8, and it continued to send aftershocks for hours and even kill people climbing Mount Everest. It happened at about noon local time, multi-story buildings collapsing into rubble in the capital of Kathmandu, and roads buckled throughout the country. Well, it is after midnight now. The darkness is hampering rescue efforts, and there's just no way to know how many people are still trapped where buildings stood just a few hours ago. Shoban Hinu is a reporter with ABC News Australia and a fellow for the International Reporting Project. She is in Kathmandu right now. And Shoban, it's about 1:45 in the morning. It's dark where you are. Can you set the scene for us and what's happening there around you?
That's right. Well, as you say, it's the dead of night here in Nepal, and we're still experiencing aftershocks almost, well, in fact, more than 12 hours after the initial quake, which was 7.9 magnitude. Now, most Nepalese are either too scared to return to their homes, or they don't have homes to return to. And so around the city of Kathmandu, where I am, there are thousands of people who are sleeping on the streets tonight after what's been an extremely devastating and traumatizing day. We've seen history literally crumble in front of our eyes today, and even Mount Everest itself was shaken by the disaster that befell this country. The earthquake led to the destruction of several very historic World Heritage registered sites around Kathmandu and in other places of Nepal. And in Mount Everest, there was tragedy at base camp where at least 8 trekkers have been pulled from an avalanche dead. There were avalanches at Mount Everest, even though the epicenter of the quake was some distance away. And of course, Kathmandu, the heavily populated capital of the country, has experienced devastation as well. More than 1,000 people have been killed. I watched bodies being pulled from the ruins of a very historic temple complex in the south of the city this afternoon. I was there taking photographs as the earthquake began. It lasted for a minute. It was extremely violent, and it sent thousands of people, both locals and tourists, running for their lives.
That's just incredible. We're looking at these images, and you're reporting that you actually saw bodies being pulled from the rubble. I want to ask you about the resources there. You know, we've been hearing stories about people, tourists, locals getting in and trying to pull people out of the rubble themselves because the authorities on the ground are stretched for resources. Is that what you're seeing as well?
That's absolutely right. Infrastructure is scarce here in Nepal. The army and the police had a minimal presence that was kind of apparent in the aftermath of the quake, but essentially it was locals banding together and tourists in some cases as well, jumping into the piles of rubble and clearing it with their hands, with picks, with shovels, and trying to get through the mess and to look for survivors. And unfortunately, where I was in the Royal Square, a historic complex of temples, there were no survivors discovered at all. It was an extremely violent quake, and there were no options in terms of places where people could run to safety. It was a built-up area, and 12 bodies at least were pulled from that area. It's mostly the historic sites, the older kind of temples and historic buildings around Nepal that have been destroyed. Many of them are World Heritage listed. Many of them were destroyed previously in 1934, where there was another huge earthquake in Nepal that killed 10,000 people.
Let me jump in there. Yeah, Shoban, if I could ask you more about the people, though. You know, where is everyone sleeping? Obviously, a lot of people scared about these aftershocks. You just reported that you felt a few already. There's been dozens of large aftershocks thereafter. And also the kind of aid that the people need there. I mean, there's no power, and communication is very difficult to get out.
That's right. The communications network is not particularly reliable here in Kathmandu. In other parts away from the capital, it's even more difficult to make any communication at all. The cell network is down, power is down in many places outside of the capital, Kathmandu. But in Kathmandu, I've observed people just sleeping in the open. Any green space, any large open roadway they can find. The public transport network was in complete chaos. There were no taxis, there were no public buses for workers and locals to get home. So this afternoon, while the whole city was still kind of clouded in this pall of dust from the earthquake and from the ruins, from the rubble, there were just thousands upon thousands of people walking through the streets trying to make their way home on foot, and most of them are sleeping in the open tonight, as I am myself, because it is simply too risky to be indoors. Aftershocks have persisted up until about half an hour ago. We felt the last one. There have been dozens in the 12 hours since the initial quake, and some of them have been quite violent.
All right, Shoban Hunu with ABC News in Australia. I really appreciate you keeping us updated. Please stay safe. And obviously, this was a violent earthquake. What the people in Nepal need the most, a very poor country, is international help, and some of that is on its way right now as we speak. Shoban, thank you.